I'm really pleased to present this collection of auricular protocols. The ACUS HMI team have been talking about it, working at it, researching, having discussions, and finally concluding and refining the product. You all have the handout that will follow the slides. There are 4 protocols that we're going to address: stress, pain, sleep, and addiction. Each of these protocols has ATP as its basic foundation starting point. There's a basic 1 and a basic 2 for each of them. And that is to say, the basic 1 is ATP plus a couple of extra points. Basic 2 is another pattern that you know, like AGAM, plus an additional 2 points. So that's your start. And then following that will be additional points that you might want to scan, assuming that your patient might have some of the symptoms that are associated with those points. Or these are additional points representing additional intracranial structures that have a play in creating or maintaining the problem that you're trying to fix, that you will want to scan to unwork their activity or resolve, refine, reform their activity in the dynamic that you're trying to create. So let's march through the first one. It should be clearer. The first one we're going to talk about is stress. Stress in any form. We're not talking about all the applications, all of the diagnostic codes, and so on and so forth, but stress. Stress is a driver behind many other principal symptoms that a patient presents with. It's also a prime complaint or a prime observation that you see as the physician. And if it's your decision to either address the patient's complaint of stress or your decision as physician to address the stress before any other problems in the patient, then this is where you would start with your auricular protocol. Basic 1 for stress is ATP plus 2 extra points. Those extra points are the red nucleus and the adrenal 1 point. There are 2 adrenal points. One is more the body of the adrenal, and one is more the ACTH secretion function of the adrenal. So we're talking about the body of the adrenal in adrenal 1. So we've got those 2 additional points. If you look at the location of the red nucleus on this slide, it's a square, which is to say that we recommend that you take the red nucleus point on the posterior surface of the ear. It's a more effective point. It's the motor point. It's the point that will relax the muscles involved in the stress manifestation. And it's an easy point to locate because it's at the intersection of 2 main grooves on the back of the ear. I've referred to that as the intersection of the Tigris and the Euphrates because they're both huge rivers. At the bottom of that, before it drops down into the Persian Gulf, is the location of the red nucleus. You can easily scan it, easily get a hot spot on anybody who has basically any musculoskeletal issues. Stress Basic 2. Stress Basic 2 is using a different starting formula, that is the AGAM. You know what that is, or you have access to that, to which we add adrenal 2 and, once again, the red nucleus. So that's Basic 2. Now, how do we do this? Because you see there are a couple of more layers with stress, and that will be the case with the others. What we're encouraging you to do here is take a patient that you'll be able to see over a period of time, not just one time only, or if you don't have continuity for your auricular patients, you write down what you want your follow-up colleague to do as to either evaluate or to do as the follow-up treatment. The recommendation is that you start any treatment sequence with Basic 1 plus. Get a sense of how they respond at that point and how they respond in the long term. Then at treatment 2, if they're doing really well and they have a really clear response, repeat Basic 1, stick with it, and go to the also scan options, which give you additional points to consider as you're marching through the patient's global presentation. There are other points that you want to address. If after that initial treatment in your follow-up visit, the patient has not gotten the convincing results either to him or to you, move to Basic 2. In this case, with stress, you would move from ATP plus to AGAM plus. And then to basic 2, just like with basic 1, you can go to your also scan collection. So you might end up with 6, 8, or more needles. Now, if you have a good result with basic 1, or in fact basic 2, at your third visit, and you want to maintain that good result, but focus on the also scan points, put basic 1 or 2 in place on the ear that you don't want to put the ASPs or the enduring needles, the indwelling needles in, and put that basic 1 or 2 in place using straight blues, so that that can be cooking the entire time the patient is in the office or in the clinic. You can have them wait for a half hour out in the waiting room before you take those out, if you wish. And then using your indwelling needles, your enduring needles, go to the next level. If it's basic 1 and you want to add basic 2 with the enduring, do that. If it's basic 1 or basic 2 that you're using to reinforce, and you want to go to the also scan collection to see if there are other needles, other points that could be active and helpful in your treatment, then put those in with the enduring needles. Right? It's a little bit more complicated in your thought process and your timing than a straightforward BFA or a straightforward ATP. But these are more complex and deeper problems than what we're trying to treat with ATP or BFA. And we're trying to get to deeper levels of manifestation and maintenance of these symptoms. So we're going deeper into the organism to address it. With DRESS, the also scan has a collection of points that are academically indicated, that are research indicated, following the algorithm MINE, M-I-N-E. We've got musculoskeletal, that's on the back, muscle relaxation, and red nucleus. We have immune. There are 2 points with the immune, allergy and antihistamine. N, we have vagus and insula, you know those. And under endocrine, we have adrenal 1, adrenal 2, pituitary, and locus ceruleus. So the goal here is to scan these, because you're touching all 4 layers of manifestation, all 4 levels of intracranial participation in creating and maintaining stress. So try to find at least one hot spot, one hot representative in each of these categories, and include that in your also scan collection of needles. Right? If you have several hot spots, there's nothing wrong with using several. So this can be put in, depending upon your patient, at the same time that he's sitting with straight needles, or as a couple of extra hot spots to add to your basic 1 or your basic 2. Right? It's a little bit more complicated in the thought process. It is, however, a responsible way of tackling the deeper dynamics of the problem. Are you okay with that? Yes. So the understanding is basic, and these same rules, these same guidelines apply to all subsequent territories. With pain, basic 1 is ATP plus vagus and insula. You've been doing this all along. This is an ideal, let's start with ATP plus vagus insula for a pain case. You can stay with that. The patient's getting good results. Stay with it. If you don't get what you want, or, given the importance of this, or at the same time that you have at the second visit, you've got your basic 1 in with straight blues, you do a somatotopic scan. And you take the 1, 2, 3, 4 needles that are active in your somatotopic findings, to which you scan and add cerebellum, thalamus, somatosensory cortex, trigeminal nucleus, and the dorsal horn, and scan the dorsal horn not just for the specific vertebral level or levels of your somatic pain, but also go up to the myotomal level and the sclerotomal level. So dermatome, myotome, and sclerotome, which basically means you want to go 2 to 5 vertebral levels higher than the vertebral level that's involved, the dermal level in the dermatomal manifestation of the discomfort. Right? So you're just scanning a larger area of dorsal horn because it's that entire territory that's involved in the nociceptive information entering the spinal cord and hitting the brain. That's basic 2. That gives you a little bit more skill, and as I say, you can do that with the full ATP plus on one side, do this on the other, or the ATP plus with the straight needles that will be reinforcing what you do the first time. This will be the second time. And your also scan here are 2 additional points that you would consider: periaqueductal gray and the co-location of raphe magnus and or the locus ceruleus, all of which are major players in maintaining pain. Right? So this gives you a range. Most patients can comfortably handle 6 needles. Many patients can comfortably handle 8 needles. I have patients that handle 12 needles without really complaining, especially including the ATPs. My habit is to use ATPs rather than the Pionex, but that's simply what I do most commonly, what my patients are used to, what I do quickly. But you need to sense with your patient where you are with how many needles you may use. Just like we recommend that you use straight needles for the first couple of times, so the patient gets a sense of, yes, this is doing a good work, yes, I'll let you put in something that's going to hurt a little bit more. You need to judge that. Do you want to use 2 ears with enduring needles? Do you want to use 1 ear while in the office and the other with the enduring as you stage this, week by week or session by session? Sleep. Sleep is an ATP plus, and the ATP plus with sleep is insomnia 1 and insomnia 2. These are what we call functional points or special points. Insomnia 2 does have an appropriate anatomical correspondence in the central nervous system, but we think of them more as functional points. The reason we're including them, since these are really the only functional points that we're adding in other than point 0 and Shen Men, is that they work. Insomnia 1 and 2 have been around for a long time in the lore of auricular acupuncture. They work. We respect that. Add them to your ATP as your first treatment for the sleep. When you get some results, or when you see the patient back, decide whether you want to repeat basic 1, use it with the straight blues, or move to basic 2, which is a collection of major players in the central nervous system: hypothalamus, pineal, prefrontal cortex, Shen Men, 0, and reticular formation. To which, at that very second time, you may also scan kidney, heart, forehead, thalamus, brain, occiput. It depends upon what kind of heat you get from the others. Actually, basic 2, we want you to put in all the needles. It depends upon here how many of these heat up. If you want to add those to basic 2 or basic 1, make your decision on how much you think your patient can handle. Addiction is a repetition of the same concept. Addiction, basic 1 is ATP plus midbrain tegmentum and nucleus accumbens. Basic 1. Addiction, basic 2, we add adrenal to AGAM. So that gives you one or the other. See what happens. And you will definitely want to scan your basal ganglia on the posterior aspect of the lobe, and according to what the addiction problem is that you're addressing, you have a collection of points that you can scan and add depending upon what it is. Now, this is not just addiction to opioids for pain, like the much heralded epidemic that we're in. This is any kind of addiction. It can be prescription opioids. It can be any kind of prescription drug. It can be street drugs. It can be sex. It can be video games. It can be alcohol. It can be eating. Any kind of addiction that knocks the central nervous driven, the intracranially driven modification modulation response of a responsible adult. Anything that knocks it off kilter, off track, is a target for the addiction protocol. This covers really the modern problem with addiction. It also covers the 4 major players in chronic VA and chronic military problems, as well as chronic civilian population. So we have here the possibility of entering the world of military medicine, VA medicine, civilian medicine with just auricular protocols, without the necessity, we hope, of training everybody in full acupuncture to reinforce and activate the the impact of acupuncture in treatment of patient care.
If you find that patients may have sleep issues because of pain or because of addiction, when you are treating them, would you rather for their follow-up to switch back and forth between protocols, or to kind of keep going with one protocol, the basic one?
Very good question. That ends up being your professional judgment. If with the first treatment, if the patient comes in with sleep as the main problem, and you use the sleep and you get some results, you get 50, 60% positive results. But when you see the patient the second time, you remember back to the first visit, your decision was between stress and sleep. You didn't get as dramatic a response as you wanted with the sleep. Let's knock out some of the stress and then come back to the sleep to see what kind of cleanup we have to do. So that really is, we don't have a firm written protocol. It's really an algorithm of selection, layer by layer, symptom change by symptom change. It really does require your physicianship participation in the process. It's not, here are the 5 points, here are the 7 points, here are the 8 points. Okay. Other questions? Yes?
When you're working on a protocol and you're doing an also scan, do you use the same ear? You can use.
You may for any protocol you may use either ear. They're cross wired. The question you need to make is if you recognize that you need to do a lot of needles at the second or third treatment, which ear is the more appropriate for the indwelling needles? That's the one that you'll needle second, and with your first ear you'll put in your straight needles. That will be there just during the clinical time that you have together. Then use the other ear for the indwelling. Right? It really, it's a juggle. You need to make that call. Paul.
For the purposes of your evaluation period over the next month or two, do you recommend that we do just, if we're going to do this, we do just this, or combine this with other treatments like we often would?
Like body treatments, you mean?
Yes, yes.
If you can, use this alone for the first visit. If you're not getting what you want, you can modify both the auricular as well as body points that you're using. If you want to use auricular with an ATP, with a Kaufman cocktail or a global balancing or any kind of somatic treatment, that's fine. We're not looking for hard, we're looking for soft. Is this really doing what we expect it to do? That's all we want to know when we get back together in January. Yes?
Can we just run through again the steps for maybe the first 3 visits?
Okay.
Kind of the range of what you want.
Which one would you like to do?
So again, let's do sleep, because I have patients who want to go down on their sleeping medicine. That's maybe their big issue. Yes, there's other confounding factors, but say, hey, I want to get off my Ambien. I really don't like it. Let's see what we can do with this.
Pause. What else do you find out from your initial interview with that patient? What other irregularities do you see? I'm not saying that we're moving sleep out of the way, just so that you have it in your notes. Is this patient particularly stressed? Has the patient gone through major trauma? Are there physical issues that you need to keep in mind? So that's on your notes and in your memory as you're looking at the patient, making your initial decision. You decide that the Willie Sutton in this case is sleep. All right, so you're going for the sleep. You start with, well, you tell me.
All right, so you start with your basic one.
Correct.
Your ATP plus.
Right.
You're going to scan them. And when they're coming in, like for our first visit, we would see them initially for auricular. So we're going to put, and they're just short appointments, so we would put Pionex in.
Fine.
For VA patients.
Fine.
So we would do Pionex, one side, ATP plus the insomnia 1 and 2.
Correct. First
All right,
treatment.
so then they come back
Then they come back.
in a couple weeks.
Right.
And they say, I feel like my sleep was better for the first 3 days, and then it went back to how it was. I was able to maybe cut down on my Ambien a little,
Okay.
but now it's back to how it was
Fine.
before. So I would.
So there you're at a crossroads.
Correct.
And this is like anything in acupuncture. Do I repeat the ATP because he slept better for a couple of days, or do I move to basic 2? You make that call. You either repeat basic 1 and add the also scans, or you do basic 2.
And so say I have them in for a longer treatment, I could do basic 2 with blue needles and go back to the basic 1 with indwelling if I wanted while they're doing something else.
I would recommend doing the indwellings with the one you did first to recall it and reinforce it, and then add basic 2 with your indwellings.
With the blue.
Yeah. No. Blues on basic 1, indwelling on basic 2.
Okay. So even though they had some response with the indwelling with the first one,
Right.
on your second visit, let's put the indwelling with the basic 2
Correct.
and the blues as a reinforcement to what you did with the
Correct.
indwelling before.
And at what point you go to the also scan is, number 1, a function of symptoms, and number 2, a function of how many additional needles your patient might be able to handle.
Right.
So you could go to also scan with basic 1 or basic 2 if they can handle more. If they can't, then you would wait to a third visit and decide what you're going to use with your straights and what you're going to get from your scan.
But on the first visit, we don't need to do the also scan.
Correct. I wouldn't overload them.
So
Right.
let's try to stick with the
Right.
basic one for the first visit.
Exactly. Because that's 8 points.
Right. That makes sense.
Does that work?
Yes, thank you.
Good clarification. Thank you. Yes.
So primarily we see, well, not primarily, we see pain patients. So if they have these additional, like she was saying, insomnia, stress, since we're kind of primarily, they're there for pain issues. If they're open to it, can we use a second ear for, a different protocol?
I would recommend, at least from now until January, that you decide what problem you're going to address and keep it limited to 1 per visit. We can pick up this discussion again in January. I'd rather have some purity, even if you're alternating from one session to the next. I'd like to have some purity as to staying within 1 protocol collection, rather than making a minestrone before the end of the week.
Okay.
You're not doing
And the
pain, right?
blues, if the blues are only in for 10 minutes, is that enough? 'Cause
Are you not able to have your patients sit in the waiting room for an extra half hour?
just switched that up in the last week. We have to be sitting with them. They just switched it last.
Oh, God, that's what they did in Washington. If they've got needles in their ear, it's a HIPAA violation because somebody might think something's wrong with them.
Exactly,
Yep.
or so they have prosthesis.
Scalp, same thing. We have to babysit them the whole time.
Yeah, okay. And you don't have an internal hallway. They're either in the public waiting area or in your office. Okay, yes is the answer. Do what you can.
How do you feel about the sleep protocol in pregnant patients?
I think about the sleep protocol in pregnant patients the same way I think about any auricular protocol in pregnant patients. As long as you're not hitting GYN hotspots or big spots like Shenmen, I'm fine with it. There have been no reports in the Asian literature, the European literature, the American literature, that body points or ear points have any impact on premature abortions or premature labor. So I'm completely okay with it. I think it's a great way of dealing with back pain of pregnancy and other mechanical issues of pregnancy that officially we're forbidden to do just for CYA purposes. I am making an official proclamation that CMA concerns do not apply to auricular. But be logical, be reasonable, stay away from hitting the uterus, stay away from hitting, big.
We have a specific pregnancy acupuncture consent form.
Fine.
That you'll get at some point, you'll get a CD with all that stuff on it, if you don't have it already and where you work at. So, which basically says what he just said, but we have to sign it.
Excellent. Fine. Thank you. Are you okay with that?
Yes, so will we just do everything other than Shenmen?
I would stay away from Shenmen and uterus. The Shenmen is strictly CYA. Because
I just tell people to stay away from uterus.
it's recognized as the big high energy does everything point in the body. It's on every protocol. It's CYA,
Yeah, okay.
just like any of the stuff is CYA. Yes?
Is there an ideal follow-up interval that you want us to try to follow up?
Ideally, you can start a patient out twice a week, somewhat more realistically, once a week, and then you're stuck with what you can get. Every 2 weeks. I don't like every 6 weeks because really you have an explosion of result, and then everything dwindles back if there's not a reinforcement. Acupuncture, unlike scar deactivation with lidocaine, doesn't hold. It needs to be reinforced and reinforced to get the results to establish themselves. Yes?
If you're using the ASPs, do you remove the ones that are still indwelling and put new ones in?
Good question. If I'm using ASPs, do I remove the indwellings? With that circumstance, if the ones from the week before are still in place, I use the other ear for the new ones and let the old ones fall out when they fall out, unless they're loose and you can just flick them out. And I use that ear then for the blue straights.
Even if you did ASPs doing blues in the same spot that is subsequent treatment, I feel like I would generally just continue ASPs on that side. If I was going to do additional needles on the other ear, consider either blues or ASPs on that side.
You need to get a sense of your patient's sensitivity on that ear. If they still have an ASP in, you want a fresher one so it lasts longer. And if they've just taken it out the day before, it will be sensitive at that spot, and you don't want to necessarily pierce anew that hole. So that's why when you're doing ASPs weekly, I strongly recommend alternating ears, no matter what side they sleep on. I mean, that alternating ears is a more important criterion than what side do you sleep on or what ear do you use for the telephone. Okay? But it's easy enough to get a straight blue in near the ASP site without necessarily going into the same hole. Okay? Good. Thank you for being up for this. This is an important project for us, and I really appreciate your engagement.